You're listening to the Precision Shooting Podcast, discussing all aspects of precision and long-range rifle shooting. This episode is brought to you by Impact Dynamics, advanced training for the precision shooter. And now, over to your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to the Precision Shooting Podcast. My name is Rusty, and with me tonight is Andrew. How you going, Andrew?
Very good, Rusty, and yourself?
Yeah, very good. And joining us from the other side of the world, Nick Vitalbo. How are you, mate?
I'm great. I will say good morning to you.
It is good morning over there, and it's about 9:30 p.m. here, and you're just having your first or second coffee. One of the ways.
Just the first.
Just the first.
I'm sure I'll get more lively as more coffee comes here.
Fantastic. And so for those guys who are not familiar with Nick's the president and the owner of nVisti, and they, well, I guess we're going to go through a lot of the stuff that the work that they do. Closely associated in many respects with Applied Ballistics. Is that right, Nick?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. And is there other? What is nVisti about? I guess as an overall question.
Well, nVisti is a small company. We are in our 7th year right now of business. So we were started back in the 2011 timeframe, and it was kind of a funny story. But early on in my career, I worked for Lockheed Martin, a big defense contractor. And my background wasn't in shooting originally. My background was actually in laser beam propagation through the atmosphere. So the funny part about that is, Brian Litz, who is the owner of Applied Ballistics, and I were kind of on a collision path ever since we got out of school. He, in his early career, spent much of his time designing missiles to, air-to-air missiles for aircraft. And quite ironically, I was on the other side of that at Lockheed Martin. I was the guy that used laser beams to try to jam missiles. And so it was kind of funny. We were always on these polar opposite sides for a long period of time there. And then eventually in 2012, Applied Ballistics and nVisti became partner companies. And my background being in the laser world, we had done a lot of stuff with optical wind measurement using lasers and laser rangefinders and things like that. And we decided to team with Applied Ballistics, and we've been doing a lot of ballistics work, obviously, for the past decade or so. And so that's the short background there, but that's how we originally came into contact, actually, was through the Applied Ballistics here. And I think it started through some emails between Andrew and I. Maybe he can kind of talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, it was interesting, actually, because some of our listeners that have tuned in on previous podcasts, quite some time ago now, I came across the Downrange Systems website, and there was certainly talk that they were going to be producing a Bluetooth module for the Vectronics PLRF rangefinders, which I have a PLRF 10, and I thought this could be something fairly handy. I'd got the Kestrel 5700 there, and I thought, well, it'd be pretty handy to be able to have them talk to each other. So in a little bit of backwards and forwards, it became apparent that they were going to be marketed through Applied Ballistics. So I end up emailing Doc Beach, and he obviously forwarded my email on to Nick, and Nick replied with the bad news that it wasn't going to be happening quite so soon. But that's how the contact started. So we are.
Here we are, having a chat. So I guess that leads us on to rangefinders. And your name has come up on the podcast before, Nick, in an episode we did, just having a bit of a look through the Modern Advancements in Long Range Shooting Volume 2 book. And for people who have read that book or perhaps heard that podcast, Nick did the rangefinder test on it, which was probably one of the highlights of that book, really. It was one of the meatiest parts of it, I thought.
Yeah, look, for me, there's a lot of valuable information in that book. However, and I've always had an interest in rangefinders, not anywhere near the technical degree that you do, Nick, but more from an end user point of view. And I guess once I started using some rifles that were capable of really getting out, sort of beyond 2,000 yards, the options became kind of limited, and so that's sort of where I end up having to look out of the sort of realms of standard gun shop rangefinders.
It sounds like you have a Plurf 15, is that correct?
10. Got the 10.
10, okay. Yeah, it's a great laser rangefinder.
Yeah, it certainly is. I've been borrowing it for a little while, and it's been it's gonna be a fight to get it back, I guess.
I sort of recall years ago I saw an article, I think it was written by Sean Carlock from Defensive Edge, and he had rigged up a doubler, like an optical doubler, to give him more magnification, and I toyed around with that idea, and sort of a little while ago now ended up machining up a mount for it, because I'm a fitter and turner by trade, and machine up a mount for the rangefinder, and I end up using a Vortex 2x optical doubler, and it seems to work a treat. I mean, we
absolutely
we use it quite regularly, and very happy.
Oh, that's great.
So, Nick, do you want to give us a bit of an overview and maybe some details about that test that you did for the for that particular book?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start, a little bit of the history here of things, but so for a long period of time, we've been talking about how lasers propagate through the atmosphere, and it's kind of funny because like I said, my background comes from doing experiments in that world. So first jamming missiles, then doing some stuff with respect to being able to use lasers to communicate. But then eventually, my team and I invented a system that basically profiles the wind between a shooter and his target. And so we got to be very familiar with how to do a lot of the detailed optical design and things like that. But we actually had started building some of our own laser rangefinders back at Lockheed Martin. And so when we started the company back in 2011, we kind of started to want to get into that realm again in the commercial marketplace, as opposed to less military and less defense contractors kind of work. And so we started to take a look at what kind of laser rangefinders were out there. And one of the most disturbing things to me personally was that it was very difficult to characterize or compare any two laser rangefinders. If you go to the website for one company versus the other, none of the specifications were the same. And so it was very, very difficult to determine, from a consumer, who has the better laser rangefinder. It doesn't, you can't compare apples to apples in that case. And so, my mission was sort of like what Brian Litz had done on the ballistic coefficient side. And I think everybody's probably very familiar that's listening to the work that Brian Litz has done with respect to his testing with the ballistic coefficients of all of the bullets. So sure. Brian, has a setup where he goes and he tests all these bullets, and he compares them and contrasts them on a single platform. And that way, every single bullet is measured the same exact way. And then you can make comparative decisions upon that. And my goal was really the same thing from a laser rangefinder perspective, and to try to set a standard in place when no standard existed. And so try to come up with a good way of testing all of these laser rangefinders on a uniform and consistent platform, essentially. And so that was really the goal of all the experiments and all the testing that we did with all of the laser rangefinders, was try to set in place a standard by which everyone else can then adhere to, so that from a consumer level, you can make an educated decision on what kind of device that fits your budget and fits the range to which you want to shoot.
Yeah, I think laser rangefinders had been one of the hardest things to make a quality decision on, because exactly what you're saying, all the data and the info had been different compared to each other. Each company was producing different information, which makes it very challenging. And so I guess the rule I certainly learnt by was just throw lots of money at it and try your best to get the best you can.
Ironically, that actually works pretty well.
Damn. All right. Fair enough.
Well, I certainly would have. I mean, I struggled to find a Vectronics rangefinder here in Australia. We just couldn't get them out of the US, being ITAR controlled. End up buying one through New Zealand, of all places. But I just found, I had Leicas, I had Bushnells, Zeiss, all the standard, I guess, models you could find, and none of them correlated at all with the specifications that they stated. There was no target size specified. There was no type of target. They say reflective, but what type of reflective? And to be honest, I was pretty sorely disappointed. And as Rusty said, there was no definitive sort of resource you could go to until this this book was published, and your article in there that allows a very direct comparison.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that it's been useful for you guys. And that was the whole objective, was to educate the consumer with the book, and hopefully they will be able to make a good decision. But then also, as a secondary effect, I really wanted to make sure that the manufacturers that were creating the laser rangefinders were all talking on the same, specifications and things like that. And actually, a lot of the companies now have started to use our data when trying to give numbers out in terms of performance. One of the companies that we're very involved with is Sig Kilo, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Kilo 2400. We were very heavily involved with that project.
Yeah.
But with respect to that, the numbers that are on the back of the box are the numbers that come out of our testing, and so that was kind of nice that they've started to take a lot of our numbers and then put them into their specifications. And that was the secondary goal, was to get the companies involved and to have them give honest and fair numbers that were all comparative to other laser rangefinders on the market.
I guess, Nick, are you able to take us through, for a lot of people, laser rangefinders are a bit of a sort of magic box where they press a button, they get a number. You able to take us through how they actually go about working?
Yeah, absolutely. So all laser rangefinders are fundamentally the same in that they measure the time of